When has someone ever used your child's disability against them? Last night at 2 a.m., I found my autistic son standing in the kitchen, staring at the locked pantry. "Buddy, what are you doing counting?" he whispered. Mr. Bleak says warriors count to 10,000 when they're hungry. It makes the hunger go away. The thing was, Theo takes everything literally. It's part of his autism. He doesn't understand when adults aren't being serious. I called Mr. Bleak the next morning. "Hey, this is Tom Litt, Theo's dad. I wanted to ask about some things Theo's been saying about food." Mr. Oblique laughed. "Oh gosh, what's he telling you now? You know how these kids are, especially the ones who claim to have autism. Always looking for attention." That stung. He's been refusing meals because he says warriors have to earn look. His tone shifted. "I served 3 tours in Iraq. I know the difference between real disabilities and kids who've been coddled." He paused. If Theo can't handle basic mental toughness exercises, maybe he belongs in the special class with the other pretenders. Well, it was easier to doubt myself than believe a teacher would hurt my son. So, I just hung up, but Theo kept getting thinner. His lunchbox came home untouched every day. When I asked why, he'd just say, "Didn't earn it," and go silent. At pickup on Friday, another mom pulled me aside. "My daughter says Theo stays in at lunch for advanced training." Mr. Oblique locks the door and covers the window. She swears she heard Theo crying once. The following Tuesday, I got the call. Theo had collapsed during P. By the time I reached the hospital, he was conscious, but hooked up to monitors, his face pale against the white sheets. The ER doctor pulled me aside, her expression grim. "Mr. Litt, when we examined Theo, we found something concerning. He's severely malnourished." "Has he been eating at home?" My stomach dropped. His lunchbox is always empty. He's lost 12 pounds. His blood work shows he hasn't been eating properly for weeks, maybe longer. She studied my face. I was about to answer when Theo, who I thought was sleeping, spoke up. "Mr. Bleak says warriors eat only when they earn it." The room went silent. "What do you mean earn it?" the social worker asked gently. Theo's eyes stayed closed. "If you can't hold your breath for 2 minutes, you didn't earn breakfast." Mr. Oblique says I'm special because I follow the real rules. My hands started shaking. "Theo, when was the last time you earned a meal?" "Tuesday." I held my breath for 2 minutes and 13 seconds. It was Friday. The social worker was writing frantically. "Theo, does Mr. Bleak check if you've eaten?" Theo's voice was small and shaky. "He weighs me every Monday. He said I'm winning." "Winning what?" "The Warrior Challenge. First one under 70 pounds becomes a real soldier. The others are just civilians." I called the other parents that night. Their kids confirmed it. Mr. Bleak joked to the whole class about starving themselves, and he knew my son would be the only one to take it seriously. I went to the principal the next morning with everything. She smiled sadly. "Mr. Bleak is a veteran. He's unconventional, yes, but the kids love him. Theo is probably just taking things too literally. I'm sure you know how autistic children can be. He's targeting my son specifically because without proof that Mr. Bleak is directly telling Theo not to eat. My hands are tied. Maybe Theo needs more support than a mainstream classroom can provide." The threat was clear. If I push this, they'd kick Theo out for being too autistic for regular school. And with that on his record, no other school would take him. I tried the police. The officer barely glanced at the notebook. "A teacher talking about warrior mindset isn't illegal. Has he physically prevented your son from eating?" "No." "Then this is a parenting issue." The next morning, I followed Theo to school and watched through the classroom window. The other kids were eating snacks while Theo sat rigidly at his desk, hands folded. Mr. Oblique walked over and whispered something. Theo nodded, his face glowing with pride. After school, Theo collapsed again. Back in the hospital, the doctor was blunt. "One more incident and we're calling CPS for medical neglect. But it's his teacher. Then remove him from that teacher's class." I just smiled because all I needed was a confession from Mr. Bleak. And I knew exactly how to get it. I called my brother Diego, a construction worker who did 2 years for violent self-defense. "Remember what Dad used to do to get us to tell the truth?" "Yeah." I need to know what this teacher is telling my son. Silence. Then teachers work late on Fridays, right? Alone. On the day, Diego brought zip ties and a baseball bat. For show, he said. People talk faster when they're scared. I didn't care about my job anymore. I didn't care about assault charges. My son was dying, convinced that starvation made him special. And the man who did this was about to explain exactly why. Just remember, Diego said as we walked toward the school. We're not leaving until he tells us everything. The side door was propped open with a brick just like Diego said it would be. My hands were shaking as we pushed through into the dark hallway. The school felt different at night, empty and cold. Our footsteps echoing off the walls. Diego walked ahead of me, the bat hanging loose in his right hand. We passed the bulletin boards covered in kids' drawings, the water fountains, the trophy case. Everything looked normal, but felt wrong. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. We turned the corner toward Mr. Bleak's classroom at the end of the hall. Light was coming from under his door. Through the little window, I could see him sitting at his desk, marking papers under a desk lamp. He had reading glasses on and was making notes with a red pen. Diego reached for the doorknob and turned it slowly. It wasn't locked. We looked at each other once more. This was it. Diego pushed the door open and we stepped inside. Mr. Oblique's head shot up from his papers. His face went from surprise to confusion to anger in about 2 seconds. He recognized me instantly, and his eyes narrowed when he saw Diego behind me holding the bat. Mr. Lit. You can't be here after hours, he said, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked just a little. His eyes kept flicking to the bat in Diego's hand. I pulled out my phone and hit record while Diego moved to stand by the door. My hands were still shaking, but I forced my voice to stay steady. We need to talk about what you've been doing to my son. Mr. Oblique shot to his feet, his chair rolling back and hitting the wall. This is breaking and entering. I'm calling security. He reached for the phone on his desk, but Diego took one step forward and Mr. Oblique froze, his hand stopping halfway. Sit down, Diego said quietly. Mr. Oblique looked at him, then at me, then slowly lowered himself back into the chair. I placed my phone on the desk between us, making sure the red recording light was visible. You've been starving my son. The words came out sharper than I intended. Mr. Oblique leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Kids today are soft, especially the ones hiding behind disabilities, he said in that teacher's lecture tone. They need structure, discipline, not more coddling from parents making excuses. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the hospital photos. Theo hooked up to IVs, his skin pale as paper, his arms so thin every bone showed. I slammed them down on his desk, hard enough to rattle his coffee mug. He's 7 years old, and you convinced him he had to earn food by holding his breath. My voice was rising despite my effort to stay calm. Mr. Oblique picked up a photo, glanced at it, and put it back down with a shrug. I never told him not to eat. He just took my warrior stories too seriously. That's not my fault if he can't understand metaphors. Diego moved closer to the desk, the bat tapping lightly against his leg. Other kids heard you tell Theo that warriors don't eat until they prove themselves, I said, watching his face for a flicker of guilt. Mr. Oblique's jaw tightened. The fake concern drained from his face, replaced by something cold and sharp. His mouth twisted into a smile that made my skin crawl. I kept the phone steady, making sure the camera caught everything. He started talking about how Theo was weak, how kids like him faked problems for attention, how he was trying to fix what I wouldn't. His words hit like blows, but I forced myself to stay still and keep recording. Diego shifted at the door, anger radiating off him, the bat still tapping against his leg. I pressed further. What about the Monday weigh-ins you mentioned to Theo? Mr. Oblique's eyes narrowed, growing meaner. When I said the words 70-pound warrior challenge, he actually looked proud. He pulled a chart from his drawer, showing the kids' names with their weights in red ink across months of dates. Theo's name had stars beside it, like he was winning some twisted contest. My stomach churned as I saw the numbers drop week after week, neat and deliberate, like a scoreboard. He kept talking, boasting about how the strong kids ignored him, but the weak ones revealed themselves. How Theo wanted so badly to be special. He'd do anything anyone suggested. My fists clenched until my nails dug deep into my palms. But I kept the phone recording, kept my voice steady when I asked if that included starving my son to death. He actually shrugged at that, muttering something about natural selection and Theo being too stupid to understand metaphors. The way he said stupid made something snap inside me, and I started to move forward, but then we all heard it. Footsteps. Coming down the hallway. Getting closer. Diego glanced out the door's window, then held up 2 fingers, mouthing that someone was coming. We froze. Me with the phone still recording. Diego gripping the bat. Mr. Oblique behind his desk with that weight chart lying right in front of him. The footsteps stopped just outside. The door handle turned. Benjamin Tucker walked in, wearing his school resource officer uniform, his hand already resting on his gun. His eyes flicked from Diego with the bat, to me with the phone, to Mr. Oblique slumped at the desk. I saw him processing it all in real time. For a moment nobody moved. 2 seconds that felt like forever. Mr. Oblique's entire demeanor flipped in an instant. He hunched forward, voice going high and shaky. They broke in. They threatened me with weapons, he cried, pointing at the bat. You need to arrest them for assault. The act was almost convincing if you hadn't just seen the cold mask he wore seconds ago. I held up my phone, showing it was recording. Tried to explain we only wanted him to admit what he'd done to Theo, that we had proof now. Benjamin kept his hand near his gun but didn't draw it. His eyes moved between us, weighing what he was seeing against what he was being told. His voice dropped into that cop tone that leaves no room for argument. Nobody move. Then his focus locked on Diego and me. His face wasn't angry, exactly. Just steady, serious. You 2 are coming with me. Right now. Diego lowered the bat slowly, setting it on the desk with deliberate care, his hands always visible. I saved the recording and slid my phone into my pocket. Mr. Oblique's expression shifted again, smug now, like he knew he'd won. Benjamin walked us out, his hand hovering close to his weapon. Not rough, but firm, keeping us in front of him. The hallway felt longer on the way out, our footsteps echoing off the empty walls. Every classroom was dark, the whole school silent except for I in the parking lot. His patrol car sat next to Diego's truck. He had us stand by it while he called for backup, eyes never leaving us. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived. Officers separated us immediately, Diego to one car, me to another. I ended up in the back of Benjamin's cruiser, watching the familiar streets blur past through the metal screen. The whole drive felt unreal. At the station, they split us up again. They emptied my pockets, phone, wallet, everything sealed in a plastic bag. Then they put me in a gray interview room, just a metal table and 2 chairs. I waited maybe 20 minutes before a detective came in. A woman with short gray hair, tired eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. She carried a yellow legal pad in one hand, my phone in an evidence bag in the other. When she asked what happened, I told her. All of it. Theo in the hospital. The other parents' stories. How I'd tried every legal channel first. She listened, really listened, instead of brushing me off like the last officer had. She took notes, asked precise questions. Dates, names, exact words. When I mentioned the recording, she held up the bag with my phone. Do you consent to me listening to this? Yes, I said instantly. She played it through the small speaker. Her face barely changed, but I noticed her jaw tighten when Mr. Oblique said natural selection and called Theo stupid. Twice she paused the recording to jot down exact quotes, underlining certain phrases hard. When it ended, she set the phone down and looked at me for a long moment, silent. She finally leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen against the legal pad. He admitted to the weigh-ins and to targeting your son's disability, she said slowly. But here's the problem with what you did tonight. She explained that anything Mr. Oblique said while Diego stood there holding a bat probably wouldn't hold up in court. You can't take justice into your own hands like that, she added, though her tone was softer now. I started to argue, but she raised a hand. I get it, I really do. But the law doesn't work that way. Then she left me alone again, and I sat there in the silence, thinking about how twisted it all was. About 2 hours later, the door opened and a woman in a sharp suit walked in carrying a briefcase. Tom Lit, I'm Shri Agriel. Diego called me from his holding cell. She moved quickly, setting papers and a tablet on the table, already taking notes before even sitting down. She asked to hear the recording, and I watched her face tighten with every word. Okay, she said finally, so you're in trouble. But this recording is still damaging to him, even if we can't use it directly in court. She worked her phone while talking to me, making calls to people she knew. When the detective returned with paperwork, Shri immediately started negotiating. They went back and forth over charges, and I caught fragments: criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit assault. Shri pulled the detective aside, whispering near the door, then came back with a plan. The detective explained I would be charged, but Shri had arranged for quick processing. Diego was facing more trouble because of his record, enhanced charges for repeat offenders. Shri spent the whole night making calls, filling out forms, pushing things through. By morning, she had us both released on bail, though Diego's was much higher than mine. This is going to complicate everything with your son, she warned as we walked to her car. CPS will definitely get involved now. Sure enough, when Shri dropped me off at my house, a man in a suit was already waiting by my front door. Mr. Lit, I'm Manuel Gray from Child Protective Services. His voice was calm, but his eyes were serious. Your son is currently in protective custody at the hospital. My legs nearly gave out. We need to determine if you're a safe placement for him given the recent criminal charges, he said. The words landed like body blows. I had tried to protect Theo, and now they were taking him away. Manuel explained the process while I stood there numb. I would get supervised visits until the charges were resolved and a safety plan was approved. He handed me paperwork with visitation times and rules. The next morning, I went to the hospital for my first supervised visit. They gave me 1 hour, with a social worker sitting in the corner taking notes. Theo looked confused when I walked in. Why can't you stay? He asked in a small voice. Did I do something wrong? I had to fight back tears as I explained it was complicated grown-up stuff. The social worker wrote down every word. Theo kept asking when he could come home, and I had no answer. That afternoon, Shri called. A reporter named Ibrahim Peterson reached out about your arrest, she said firmly. Don't talk to him yet. But he's already digging into Mr. Oblique's past. He's finding things at other schools, though we need to be careful. 2 days later, the school board held an emergency meeting that filled the auditorium. The principal stood at the front and announced Mr. Oblique was on paid administrative leave pending investigation. Parents started shouting from both sides. At the school board meeting, a veteran dad defended Mr. Oblique, shouting that he taught real discipline, not soft participation trophies. But other parents stood up with their own stories. The room grew so loud the board president kept banging her gavel. That night, Shri got a call from Faith Owens, the school counselor. She'd been documenting Mr. Bleak's behavior for months, dates, quotes, incidents, but was too scared to go public. Her notes could help, but she feared losing her job. The next supervised visit was harder than the first. I overheard Theo telling a nutritionist he missed Mr. Bleak because he made him special. He proudly explained the Warrior Challenge and how he was almost at 70 pounds. My heart broke. He still believed starving himself was an achievement. The nutritionist warned recovery would take a long time. Manuel from CPS wrote everything down as more evidence. At Diego's bail hearing, the prosecutor brought up his old assault case. The judge revoked his bail, and I watched my brother nod before being led away in chains. He'd gone to jail trying to protect Theo. That afternoon, Shri brought papers compiling my recording and Faith's notes. We sent them to the district, but their lawyer only replied that an investigation was pending. Meanwhile, I prepared my house for Manuel's safety visit: locks, food charts, logs. He said it looked good, but my charges still made placement uncertain. 2 weeks later, the prosecutor offered a plea: drop it to misdemeanor trespass with probation if I agreed not to sue the school. Shri said it wasn't bad, but it meant Bleak might never face real consequences. At the next board meeting, parents split into two camps. One dad praised the warrior mindset. Others told stories of kids being shamed, denied food, or punished instead of eating. The room erupted, security escorting 2 dads out after a near-fight. 3 days later, Ibrahim's article hit the paper, teacher under investigation for student welfare concerns. He found Bleak had been disciplined at his last school for excessive physical training. The union called it a smear campaign, but the story spread fast online. That same day, Theo's therapist scheduled an emergency session. She said he'd been having nightmares, dreams where I stopped loving him because he failed warrior challenges. She warned the damage went deep, and recovery would take months, maybe years. I sat in my car afterward, shaking with rage at what Bleak had done to my son's mind. After Ibrahim's article, Faith finally came forward with 6 months of notes documenting Mr. Oblique's behavior, especially toward kids with autism or learning disabilities. The district's lawyer suddenly wanted a meeting. At Diego's sentencing, he got 6 months, 4 with credit. His company fired him, and his girlfriend cried outside court, worried about rent. I gave her what little money I had, but the guilt weighed heavy. 2 weeks later, during my supervised visit, Theo asked when he could return to Mr. Bleak's class. I'm almost at 70 pounds. I'm winning the warrior challenge, he said. My chest broke hearing it. That same day, I got defamation threats from Oblique's lawyer. Shri said it meant he was desperate. The district offered to transfer Theo to another school with counseling and an aide. I signed. Meanwhile, Shri got my trespass charge reduced to probation and community service. Manuel approved unsupervised visits after I finished a parenting class. Having Theo home for a day felt like breathing again. Ibrahim's second article quoted experts on how kids with autism are especially vulnerable to authority manipulation. Soon after, the school board voted for new neurodiversity training, while rumors spread that Oblique was negotiating his exit.